Hi, and my name is Martin from Illuminating Rounds, and today we are doing Tabletop Talks number 6, and we're going to be looking at infantry movement. Tabletop Talks number 5 looked at the basic mechanics of how infantry move. Tabletop Talk 6 is going to be talking about how we can use all the different rules in the game to make your infantry movement safer. It's worth me saying that this is obviously really aimed at newer players. I think more experienced players may or may not enjoy watching this. And the other thing to say really is that we cover a lot of different rules in this tutorial. And the key thing to take away is that I'm not doing a deep dive. So for example, we're going to do Armoured Assault. We're going to talk about Armoured Assault. There's lots of aspects to Armoured Assault I'm not going to talk about. I'm just going to go through very much the basics so that you're able to use it. If you are using it in a way that you think is at all complex, you need to go back to the rule book and check up on that. So today we're going to be going through what happens when you non-assault move in open ground, how you can move more safely by using assault move, how you can move more safely using cover, how you can use infantry smoke, which is often forgotten, restricting subsequent fire. We're going to be thinking about somewhere to route to, because if you're crossing open ground, likely some of your units will break. We're going to be thinking about tank smoke from their main armament, but also from their dischargers and also from their vehicular smoke grenades. We're going to be looking very briefly at armoured assault, riding on tanks, vehicle bypass freeze, and finally riding on trucks. We're going to look at that. Right, let's have a look at infantry movement. So I've prepared a little bit of a situation up here so we can have have a little look at different approaches to this. We have got 3 concealed stacks of British at the top of the board. Now I'm going to show you what's there, but obviously if we're attacking as the Germans, we wouldn't normally know. The British have 1 medium machine gun in K7. They have dummies in N6, and they have a medium machine gun with a crew exactly the same in P6. The Germans know what the British have, but they don't know which of these are real and which of these are dummies, and that'll play into some of the decisions that we make as the game progresses. Okay, first thing, the Germans, they need to approach this British position. Okay, I'm going to start with non-assault move. I'm going to take this squad here, and this squad is simply going to move to the fullest that it can. It's going to declare double time, and it's going to move into here for 1. Already, probably this medium machine gun can see it. I'm not 100% sure, so we're probably going to wait because he's non-assault moved. Moves to here for 2, and straight away the British can see him, and we can take a shot for -2 against that unit. It's a very good chance that squad is going to break or pin. There's also a 1 in 3 chance that the medium machine gun maintains its rate of fire. It's also a very good chance that the British would lay a fire lane, which would mean that there's sort of residual in all of these hexes, make it much more difficult for other forces coming up. We can also take a shot from here and do the same thing, have a fire lane coming down here, which would effectively put residual all the way through this central area. So that's the most dangerous way of moving your units. If they don't break and they don't pin, they're able to cover an awful lot of ground. The next method that we'll look at is very simple, and that is assault move. So this guy, rather than charging across the board, he could simply assault move into there. And obviously when he assault moves, it only costs, if anybody fires at him, it would only be -1 for open ground. You don't get the -1 for non-assault move. So obviously he's a little bit safer. Now this shot, if he can see him, would be a 4 -1 for the open ground, making this a much less dangerous shot than before. The problem, of course, is he isn't going to get very far. In the advanced phase, he can move forward 1 more hex, so they've moved 2 hexes in 1 turn. The next method is simply to move your infantry wherever possible under cover. If they can move under fire, they can move at speed. We have a squad here, and we have a leader, movement factors of 6. They're the other side of this wood, so they can't be seen. 1, 2, 3, bypass, 4, 5, 6. In the advanced phase, they'd be able to advance into here, effectively beginning to flank the British, making it difficult for them to perhaps withdraw. So next thing we want to look at is infantry smoke. We've got a squad here, a 548 and a 70 leader, and they're going to non-assault move up to here for 2. Actually, they could even do this as an assault move, 2 to there, and then they're going to place or attempt to place smoke into here. Now, if you place smoke in your own hex, it costs 1 movement point. If you place it in another hex, it costs 2. It's by no means certain most of the time. This engineer squad has a smoke exponent of 2, so I roll 1 dice. On a 1 or a 2, we're able to place the smoke. We don't. We rolled a 6, which actually finishes the movement for that unit. So we had a negative effect there. But there was a 1 in 3 chance of placing smoke here, which perhaps could have been useful for subsequent units moving up here, protecting them from fire from there. Another interesting use for it, if we could imagine perhaps that this unit hasn't moved and they're beginning their turn right here, and they are fortunate enough to be able to non-assault move forward 1, 2, 3, and they get to there, and they've used up, in fact, we can take the leader off. He's used up all of his movement points except for 1 point. But he isn't going to be able to get into any of these buildings. Doesn't want to late CX. He could simply use that last point to go for. Go for smoke grenades. Ended his movement as well. But sometimes in a way that's almost free to do that, because if you've spent 2 or 3 movement factors, but you don't want to go any further, but you're in a position where you could place smoke in your own hex. And that's going to make the enemy fire a little bit less effective. That's certainly something that it's easy to forget to do sometimes, especially when you've got smoke exponents like 1. So there's a relatively low chance of getting smoke. If it's not costing you anything, you might as well have a go anyway. Of course, if you've got American infantry or you've got assault engineers, those higher smoke exponents, people tend to remember to use them when you've only got a smoke exponent of 1. But it's there, and it can be very, very effective way of getting you through. Next thing is really just about trying to restrict enemy subsequent fire. So you might use half squads for this as much less valuable units. We've got a half squad here. He can double time and move. He's going to move to there for 1. He's double timed. 2. Bypass 3, 4, 5, 6. It may be the British choose not to fire at a relatively unvaluable unit, a mere half squad, waiting for a juicier target. So the half squad gets nothing firing at him. He gets very, very close to the British. When the British do eventually open fire, it restricts their subsequent fire options. I have to say, because these are crews with medium machine guns, it's perhaps a little bit less effective than when you've got mostly squads manning machine guns. But it can be very effective. Same here, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So once things have fired, they've done first fire. So once the British first fired, their subsequent fire can only be at a nearest known enemy unit, which would mean that units could move around here relatively reasonably safely. So the next thing I want to think about is thinking about places where you can route to, because some of your units are likely to break. What you really want to do is be able to bring them back to woods, ideally somewhere where they can be rallied safely. If you're just charging off into open ground like this, it's very difficult. Once you get to here, if you break here, for example, it's very, very difficult to rout. And let's just say that the British reveal fire and they break this unit. He's not going to be able to rout. He can't rout into this building because he's obviously going to be still adjacent to known British units. He's going to have to surrender in this situation. But if you've got a vehicle, you can use the vehicles to create route paths, so he can come along afterwards. Simply parking himself there would allow this unit to route undercover to that low crawl to there. But if you plan it better, so things actually route rout in places where you're going to be able to bring them back to woods. So for example, let's say he breaks in 05, tank comes to here. Now your Haskell can route into this wood and then continue to route to R3, where they're going to be safe from subsequent British fire, you can take a low value leader over there, or even a high value leader over there, and perhaps rally them and bring them back into the action very, very quickly. So tanks, by moving them after the infantry, give you opportunities to create route paths for the infantry that broke in the movement when the infantry were moving. So in the next situation, we're thinking about how you might be able to use a tank that is armed with special ammunition smoke in order to help your infantry to move. So looking at this vehicle here, it has S8. You see the S8. That means that it has smoke on an 8, and we are going to, in our prep fire phase, we're going to attempt to fire it at one of these two units. Now we don't know which is real, which is a dummy, or whether they're perhaps both real. So it's kind of expensive firing at something when there's only perhaps a 50-50 chance that it's even a real unit. But actually there's reasons why it might be inexpensive to have a go at firing smoke here. And the reason is that because you've got a smoke you've got a depletion number of 8, if you roll higher than an 8, you haven't got any smoke at all, and you won't have prep fired. If you roll lower than an 8, you have got smoke, and in most situations you're probably going to hit as well. So you don't waste the shot. You can take the shot, see if you get smoke, and if you do, that's very helpful. If you don't get smoke, you can probably still move in most instances. So firing smoke like this is an area target type. We're going to fire at this one. When you fire smoke at targets within 12 hexes, the to hit number is increased. So area target type is normally a 7 to hit. We increase that to 9. We are crew exposed, so that's not going to affect us. But our opponent is concealed, so that's going to be a -2 for our dice roll. Effectively, on a 7, we will land smoke into this hex. On an 8, we will miss, and we will have wasted our prep fire shot. Above an 8, and we'll still be able to move, we won't have prep fired. So it's a relative, and of course a 12, we've made malfunction our main armament. If I rolled a couple of dice here, we would have placed smoke, but we would have prep fired. So it will cost us the movement phase, but at least we got some smoke onto one of the possible positions that the British are defending. Okay, so the next one I want to look at is using smoke dischargers on these vehicles. So we've got a tank here, the Panzer IV-H, brilliant tank for supporting kind of infantry movement. And you can see it has SD5, that means it has smoke dispensers on a 5. So let's assume I decide not to prep fire with my main armament smoke, or I fired and I didn't have smoke, or I missed. I can be moving 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In fact, actually, even here wouldn't be a bad place. I'm kind of conscious that I might get a shot from here at the infantry when they move in a minute. I can declare that I'm firing my smoke dispensers, SD5. Because I'm buttoned up, I need to roll a 4 or less, and I have rolled a 6, so the smoke dispensers don't fire. But unlike it's not a depletion number, so in fact I still might be able to use smoke dispensers in the future. But I can still potentially get some smoke there, because I can also go crew exposed, and I can try for vehicular smoke grenades. I have to roll 1 dice, and on a 3 I would not get them. So you would need to be crew exposed to use the vehicular crew smoke grenades, and an armoured vehicle like this has smoke grenades on a 1 or a 2. So in this case we didn't get them, but we've now had 2 opportunities to place smoke in a key hex that's going to restrict the fire or make less effective the fire from this unit. I guess having failed all of those things, you could conceivably perhaps button up for safety, move closer. Now this is where you're gonna limit subsequent first fire by being adjacent to them. You could potentially fire the machine guns at this unit and break it before the infantry even start to move. And of course you could also move into vehicular bypass, which I'll talk about at the end. That would completely restrict this unit from firing on the infantry that we're going to move in a moment. So let's now have a look at Armoured Assault. Now for Armoured Assault, realistically, you have to have an infantry unit begin your turn in the same hex as an armoured unit, as we have here. We have a squad and we have our Panzer IV-H. They have to move together as a stack. So you have to declare Armoured Assault at the beginning and they move together. So that's one movement factor for the infantry, one movement point for the tank. You kind of have to keep track of both, just in case, because obviously the stack needs to stop when one of them runs out of movement factors, movement points. Move 1 to there, we can move 2 to here, 3 to here, 4 to there. Okay, so the benefits of moving in that way is that the infantry unit is not considered to be moving in open ground, as long as it began the movement phase and moves all the way through the movement phase with that armoured vehicle. Even if the armoured vehicle doesn't stop at the end, it's still considered to benefits from the TEM of that vehicle all the time. Now, tanks offer +1 TEM, so as long as he's moving with him, he's going to get +1 TEM, and he's not subject to first fire in movement in the open FFMO. He is subject to non-assault move in the way that we chose to move him. So if there's a shot from here, this medium machine gun would be a 4 flat, +1 for the tank, -1 for non-assault move. The Germans could, at the beginning, have opted to Armoured Assault and declare an assault move at the same time, in which case they would move forward like that, just one hex, and any shots against that would be +1. +1 for the tank, and then there's that you don't get anything for the first fire movement in the open or non-assault move. So that's a very, very good way of really increasing the likelihood of infantry moving across open ground. So let's have just a quick look at vehicle bypass freeze. So the rule is that if somebody is in your an enemy unit is in your location, then you can't fire out of it. And the really great thing about tanks is that they're immune to small arms fire. They're not completely immune to medium machine guns being fired in an anti-tank role, but these sort of relatively well armoured tanks are pretty safe against medium machine guns. So realistically, this tank is virtually invulnerable to the British fire. That's not quite true in close combat, but as you'll see, it's possible for this tank to move into the unit where the British are, take a chance on the British being successful with a close combat attack against the tank, and absolutely stop any fire out of the hex. So this tank, assuming it's in motion, goes 1, 2, 3, 4. Here it tries for smoke dispensers, it tries for smoke grenades, they don't work. 5. Now you have to think carefully about this. So, say you moved 6 to there. This unit now has 7 movement points left, and what we're going to do is move into bypass of the hex side between here and here, but we are actually in K7 where the British crew are. And we're going to use, instead of the 2 movement points it normally costs, we're going to declare all of the remaining 7 movement points. So we've got no movement points left as we move into there. We've now spent 13 movement points. The British are not going to be able to move out. I'm going to put a motion counter on because we didn't spend a point to stop. If the tank spends a point to stop, they become much more vulnerable in the close combat. These British units are now useless as far as this movement phase is concerned. Also, the Germans get to find out when that tank finishes its movement in the same hex. The Germans get to find out whether this is a real unit or not. If these were dummies, they'd have to be revealed. And of course, they're not dummies, but they have to be revealed. Now, the British can do a reaction fire attack They need to pass a patsy, which they would pass on an 8 or less, say for the sake of argument that they achieve that. They automatically ambush the tank. When you, because they're so the situations where the ambush is automatic are, when a tank moves into bypass of a wood or a building where enemy units are. There's another situation where tanks are going down roads with buildings on both sides. That can also be an automatic ambush situation. It's an automatic ambush situation. Crews have a CCV of 4, which means they need to roll 4 or less to damage this tank. With an ambush, they can subtract 1 from their dice, so we're now on 5, which is starting to sound reasonably good. But because the tank remained in motion, we're also going to add 2 to our dice roll. So the CCV is 4, what we need to roll in order to destroy the tank, but we're adding 1 in balance. Adding 2 for the motion, minus 1 for the ambush, adding 1. So in actual fact, the British need a 3. They don't get it, they get 1 above, has no effect. So that tank has effectively taken that medium machine gun out of action for this turn at the cost of moving the tank. It's going to make it much more easy for the infantry to follow on and to move. Okay, sort of finally, we're going to be having a look at trucks. I suppose you could debate this a little bit, whether infantry is safer in a truck or not, but they probably are safer. You can see this truck here has 29 portage points, which means it could carry 2.5 squads. It almost certainly wouldn't be particularly safe to risk driving under fire with 2.5 squads on board. But with 1 squad on board, it probably is a reasonable risk. And the reason for that is because of this crew survival number, which we'll come to in a moment. I'll explain. Trucks are pretty slow in open ground, but because I think it's 4 movement points movement points per open ground hex. But trucks tend to have quite a high number of movement points, so it's 4 to there, 8 to there, 12 to there, 16 to there. So we're doing quite well, making good progress. Right, so at this point the British have decided that they are going to fire this medium machine gun. Now normally, against infantry moving that quickly, this would be 4 minus 2, and on 4 minus 2, a 7 would be a 1 morale check. But because they're in a vehicle, this is all going to kind of like play out quite differently. First, what you have to do is work out whether or not the vehicle itself is destroyed. Now on the 4 column, the to kill number for firing at non-armoured targets is 5. So actually there's a relatively good chance that the truck won't get destroyed by the medium machine gun firing at it. It might do, but reasonable chance that it won't. If it doesn't, you then get the collateral attack against the infantry. Let's say we rolled a 7, for example. Now 7 on a 4 wouldn't destroy the vehicle or do any damage to it at all, but it would be a pin task check on the infantry. Remember that same 7 rolled when they're non-assault moving through open ground would have been a 1 morale check. So that's a much less serious sort of penalty. The reason that you could debate whether they're safer is if you roll low. So if, for example, you rolled a 5, in this instance, you would immobilise the vehicle and the infantry would still have to take the whatever a 5 would be, 5 4 would be a 1 morale check. If they rolled a 4 or a 3, the vehicle would be destroyed and the crew would share its fate unless they passed the crew survival roll, which would be a 7. Well, 7 is quite a high number because this is a very big vehicle. So if you roll a 7 or less, the crew get out unscathed, even from a destroyed vehicle. If the initial shot is lower than I think it's less than or equal to half of 5, so basically a double 1, the vehicle would become a burning wreck and everybody inside it would be killed too. The squad would be KIA. But as you can see, really, while moving in trucks in that way, actually the British have to roll pretty low to have a very, very big impact on the infantry. So it's actually kind of safer in trucks. It helps that this vehicle has a very, very high crew survival number. Most trucks don't have one as high as that because they're smaller vehicles. I think that's what this reflects. But nonetheless, that's certainly something to consider. And the real trick, the beauty of Advanced Squad Leader is the dance of how all of those different techniques can work together, depending on your resources, can be put together to create a very, very effective plan of attack. Maybe there'll be some prep fire. Maybe there'll be a half squad rush to restrict subsequent fire. Maybe there'll be some smoke. And then when the British start to take their shots, it's going to be the residuals going to be lowered by the effects of the smoke. Maybe you'll be doing some assault movement. Maybe you're going to be rushing some other guys forward. It's the dance. It's the way it all plays together to create like the perfect plan that limits the defensive fire options of the British and allows the attackers to move forward. And that's it. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you got something out of it. Take care. 2 weeks from now, there'll be the next Tabletop Talks. Cheerio. Bye-bye.